Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome to our inaugural UGS Spotlights on Student Success speaker series and to our first event of the series. Today's session will be featuring the Friends of HSF Alumni Network through featured speaker Selena Nevin. Selena serves Pittman Law Group as a legal policy and research assistant. After interning with the firm as an undergraduate student, she has now officially joined the staff and provides support to their legal and government affairs teams. From working in the Florida House of Representatives, she is well-versed in the legislative process and brings a fresh perspective to the firm's efforts during legislative session. In addition to her political experience, her past position working for the United Nations has earned her critical research, drafting, and analytical abilities that she now brings to her role in the Pittman Law Group. Selena is a proud graduate of Florida State University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in International Affairs and a Bachelor of Science in Political Science and Middle Eastern Studies. She has written and presented her research across the country on topics as representation of women in Middle Eastern governments, the radicalization of Muslims in the West, and the domestic terror threat posed by white supremacists. She loves supporting FSU athletics, improving her fluency in French, Spanish, and Arabic, and enjoying Tallahassee's parks with her dog, Jackson. I also enjoy the parks. Thank you for being here, Selena. Our student moderator for today is Juan Roca Paisley. Juan is a sophomore from Miami, Florida, majoring in political science with a minor in physics. Juan's interests include education, journalism, and history. Thank you for being here, Juan. I'm now going to turn it over to you, Selena, to discuss. You can tell us about failure and how to use failure as a motivator.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Juan, for being here as well. My name is Selena. Thank you, Amy, for that introduction. Today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about failure and how to use failure as a motivator. But before I start, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to the Division of Undergraduate Studies for letting me speak with you all here today. Thank you to Amy, and thank you to Dean Raimondi and the incoming Dean O'Shea for their leadership. And then also I want to say how grateful I was to be the Friends of HSF speaker for this series. And so I'm excited to be the inaugural speaker, ready to kick us off. And I just wanted to say HSF, it's the best shout out right there, because they definitely, the departments there, the people there, they definitely made me into the woman I am today. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, so first, I want to introduce myself. So Amy gave a little bit of background into who I am professionally, but what she didn't cover in line with today's theme for the presentation are my failures. And so I put together a little failures resume mock-up for you all. So just this isn't by no means an exhaustive list. This is just some things that I remembered and can think of as I was preparing for today's lecture. And usually most of them are pretty much within my time as an undergraduate student, and then the 1 year that I've had post-grad, because I graduated last May. So at the top, you'll see rejected from Duke and Georgetown. Those are the two schools I really wanted to go to for undergrad. Then moved to internship and job applications from as far back as last year and as recent as last week. And then we go to fellowship rejections. These are all fellowships that I applied to as an undergraduate student, denied from all of them, didn't get an internship or an interview for any of them, excuse me. But huge shout out to the Office of National Fellowships, ONF, in the HSF building, because I can guarantee you the applications that I had put together wouldn't be nearly as good without them. Then we go to research failures. So a lot of the time that I spent at FSU was covered in research. That's where I spent a lot of my time, as Amy mentioned, but that didn't come without its failures. So probably the biggest failure that I considered of my undergraduate career was not finishing my honors in a major thesis my senior year. Teaching failures, I also was Europe leader training instructor, and I had to quit that position in the middle of the semester just because I got really overwhelmed. Personal wishes, maybe perhaps some personal failures. I wish I told myself I'd be enrolled in an LSAT prep course by now, this time this year, and I'm not yet, so I need to get on that. Procrastination at its finest. I wish that I had been selected for FSU homecoming court. I wish I got outside more often, and exercised more, and kept up with practicing foreign languages. So those are just some of my personal failures, I guess. But one thing that I want to express to you all is I didn't put these all up here so you could pity me and feel bad for me. I just wanted to really express how, especially now in the age of social media, we only see the facade of success that people put up that they want you to see, because it's a lot easier to like and to trust somebody who tells you how great they are than it is to trust somebody and like somebody who says, here's all the ways that I suck, right? So that's why people post the good things on social media. Nobody posts about the job they didn't get, the city that they didn't move into, or the graduate school that they didn't get accepted for. So just keep that in mind. And I want to challenge you to think of the person that you idolize the most, your hero, the person you think has it all, is super successful, gets everything they want, never fails. And I want you to think that they too have a failure resume that looks a lot longer than you probably think it does, because the reasons why you admire them is due just as much to their failures as it is due to their successes. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. And I hope that by the end of today's lecture, you'll be able to really recognize that. But before we start, we kind of have to define what failure is. It looks different for a lot of people. You might say, Selena, not getting on homecoming court is a blessing because then you wouldn't have to walk on the football field in heels, right? But to me, it was important. So it looks different for everybody, but a good common expectation or not meeting a requirement. So not meeting a requirement, that's usually set by others. So that's when your professor tells you that you have a deadline of 11:59 on Sundays to submit your paper and you didn't submit the paper. That would be a failure to meet a requirement. Failure to meet an expectation. Expectations can be set by either yourself internally, like a personal expectation, or it can be set by others. So not meeting a personal expectations would be like, I told myself I'd go to the gym yesterday and I didn't go. But when you get into the realm of expectations that others set for you, it can be a little tricky because we convince ourselves that people expect more from us than they might actually expect. So I can convince myself that my boss always wants me to turn things in before the deadline. Or I might convince myself that my partner expects me to always look good. Or I might convince myself that my friends expect me to always hang out with them more because I don't hang out with them. And so when I fail to do those things, I think, Selena, you're failing. You're failing in these departments. But really, that expectation was never clearly communicated to me. And so I don't even know if those expectations actually exist. I'm just inventing them. And so that can be a slippery slope into being really super detrimental to your mental health and your self-esteem, because while failure is inevitable, constant failure and convincing yourself of constant failure without success is not so good. So just keeping that in mind. I'm gonna try to ask you guys to, whenever you fail at something, ask yourself, is this an expectation that was clearly set for me, or was this an expectation that I assumed was real, but really might not be real? So once we've identified the failure and accepted it, that's kind of the hard part, is accepting it. Because we don't want to admit defeat, right? We want to be big and bad. We want everybody else to think that we're awesome. We want to think that we're awesome ourselves. So it's really hard to accept that failure. But once we do it, it's a lot easier for the rest of these steps of overcoming failure to happen. So when you fail at something, a lot of people might, downplay it or say like, oh, I didn't really want it that bad, or they might say, oh, well, I'm glad I didn't get it because the person who's going to get it is going to have like the worst time. It's going to suck. So a lot of times that's like deflecting the feelings that we're having. So I would encourage you to really sit in those emotions, because emotions are temporary. So let that disappointment come, sit in it for a sec, and then let it go, because then you'll be able to move on to something better. And how do we get to something better? It's just all about how we view that failure, how we view that failure to get what we wanted. So we accepted it, and now I want to challenge you all to redirect that energy and that time that you had set forth on that one goal. So a lot of the times, when we accept failure, it's really easy to get down this really negative path. So we might say, I didn't get the internship that I really wanted this summer, and I needed that internship because when I applied to graduate school, I need work experience. And so if I don't have the internship, I don't have work experience, which means I'm not going to get into the graduate school program that I really wanted to get into. And if I don't get into that graduate school program, I'm never going to get a job, and then I'm just going to be miserable forever. And so if we were like in a, a classroom environment traditionally, I would ask you guys to, break down why that is so harmful and just really not helpful. But today, I guess I'm just going to tell you. But so it's a pretty common train of thought to use that. It's called the doomsday approach. I'm guilty of it. I'm sure many of you are as well. But what I want to challenge myself and for you guys to try to do is, instead of viewing it as, this is the end of the world, try to see it as like a free pass to do anything, right? So we often get really tied to this life plan that we set out for ourselves. You come into FSU or you come into college saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get good grades. I'm going to join a sorority. I'm going to become, an exec member. And then I'm going to get an internship at this great accounting firm my junior summer. And then I'm going to graduate. I'm going to be the best accountant ever. Okay, but what happens when you don't get into sorority? What happens when you don't get that internship? When we get tied to that life plan and something unexpected happens, we're often running around like a chicken with our head cut off. We're like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do now? That was the plan. Now that I don't have the plan, what am I meant to do? And the answer is anything. You can do anything. You didn't get that grade you wanted on your test. Well, now you get to, not you have to, you get to go talk to your professor and build a relationship with them, or build a relationship with a study buddy or the library staff when you go there to get help. You didn't get the internship you wanted this summer. Well, now that's a chance for you to take summer classes and finish your degree early so you can get an internship after you graduate. Or you didn't get on exec board for the sorority that you're in. Well, now you get to have more time to spend getting to know other organizations on campus that you might enjoy spending your time with more, right? So when we fail, I want you to see it as a free pass to do anything that you didn't anticipate having the ability or the chance to try before, because it was never in your plan. And so I'll give you a bit of a personal example. So I have been applying to jobs since last February, trying to find something. And so I'm grateful that I have this opportunity, but I want to try, to working somewhere else, right? So for me, if I had gotten the first job that I had applied to in February of last year, I'd be doing something completely different than I see myself doing now professionally, right? So just because along this job search journey that I've been on, I've discovered different positions, different organizations that I never have found. I never would have found if I had gotten that first job. And so I might have seen success in getting that first position, right? Everybody's gonna be like, oh my gosh, wow, Selena, you have your first job, the first job you applied to, you got, that's insane. Nobody does that. That's so awesome. And I might see myself as being successful if that were to happen. But I never would have known the success that would have come with being in a position that I now see myself in, if that makes sense. So really just thinking about moving your time, energy to another goal that you might not have seen yourself doing. And that other goal could still be the same idea. So let's say I really wanted to get that fellowship my senior year, but I didn't get it. I can still have the goal of getting that fellowship. It could just be delayed. So now I have to apply for it another time, and I get it another time that I didn't really first anticipate getting that fellowship, if that makes sense. And so after we redirect that energy, so now that I've redirected my energy to applying for different kinds of jobs, well, what am I supposed to do? I've decided that I want to apply for different jobs, but now what do? You have to like motivate yourself to get there, right? This is probably the hardest, most challenging part of failure, besides maybe acceptance, right? Acceptance, the initial like, I don't really want to admit defeat. Once you do that, and then once you decide what you can do after, now comes the hard part of actually doing it. So this comes really with realizing that there's not just one path to your goal. So if you see yourself in the future doing one thing, you have a vision for your life, there's not one way to get there, right? Even though you have your hard set plan on how to get there, there's a million different ways you can get there. So usually what happens is, when you receive that rejection or that bad grade or whatever it may be, oftentimes we can see that as somebody telling us, you're not good enough. You didn't try hard enough. You didn't study hard enough. you know, you're just not good. But really, those rejections aren't a referendum on who you are. They're not a referendum on what your value is, what you can contribute. All it means is that you just didn't get the position, you didn't get the job, you didn't get the internship, and now you just get to try to do something else. You get the chance to do something else that you never would have thought of doing before. And so, kind of forcing yourself to see that new path can be difficult, but it's super, I guess, motivating in the sense that you have all these options out there for you. And where I think a lot of people go wrong is they're scared to try something new because they don't want to fail. And that's why I put this really cheesy picture up here, because you know, a lot of times you're trying to say you can do it, but then you're like, it's like, never mind. I'm not gonna try to fail right now. So what I encourage you all to do is realize that fear of failure ensures failure. And when you learn to embrace failure in a way that allows you to move to new opportunities, that's when you'll actually succeed. Because this process of acceptance, redirection, and motivation, that's a way for you to get better each and every time that you fail, right? And it can be applied to professional failures, for sure, academic failures, and also personal failures. Like if you accept a failure in a relationship, maybe like relationship gone bad, you redirect your energy to something else, everything that you learned, and then you're motivated to do better in the next relationship that you're in, right? So it really applies to pretty much any kind of failure that you experience. And so I want you guys to realize that this is an inevitable process, right? It's going to happen regardless, but it's how you handle it that really allows you to grow. And so that person that you think has it all, like your idol that I asked you to think about in the beginning, they have just as many failures as you do, probably more. If they're like older, you know, as we move through life, that, you know, hard set plan that we have for ourselves oftentimes gets super rigid. Because if you think about it, when you're little, you wanted to be an astronaut, and the next week you wanted to be an author, and the next week you wanted to be a marine biologist. Whereas now you see yourself as, I can only be this one thing. So, and there's only one way to get there. And so just thinking about how failures are just chances to redirect yourself to do something better. And before we go to questions or anything, I'll just leave you with this quote by Janet Finch. The phoenix must burn in order to emerge. So to be a successful student at FSU, or just to be successful beyond graduation, or just be successful in general, you will have to fail. You will fail. And I think you should almost want to fail in a way. That's something that I've come to kind of appreciate, is that with that failure, it's a chance for you to discover more and you know, really learn more about what's out there that you wouldn't have known if everything had gone your way. Because if you think about everything, all the successes that you've had in your life, there's failure attached to them that you may have maybe forgotten about or pushed to the back of your mind. And whether those failures be directly or indirectly associated with your successes, they're there. And just, we oftentimes try to forget them or try to downplay them. But failure is as inevitable as success. And I'll say that again. Failure is as inevitable as success. So you will have just as much success as you will failure in your life. And so it's just a matter of seeing it as a temporary process that you move through to go to the next step. So you have success, then you have failure, then you have success, then you have failure. And it's not something to be ashamed of by any means. So I will leave that at that. I hope this was helpful, but if we have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Selena, thank you so much. That was a great presentation. We have some pre-submitted questions for you that I'd love to ask you. And if anyone else has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we'll make sure to get to them. One thing that I really liked your Janet Finch quote at the end, and it reminded me a lot of, I think, kind of a Silicon Valley mantra that's move fast and break things. And that idea of changing rapidly and accepting failures and moving forward really quickly and iterating. On that note, the first question we have pre-submitted was, for those of us who are scared to admit we have failed, how can we accept those moments and turn them into positives?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. This gets to a little bit what I was saying with, that first step of acceptance is oftentimes the hardest part for a lot of people. The good news is that you don't have to scream it from the rooftops that you failed. It can just be a personal admission. You don't have to put all your failures on a resume in front of people on a Zoom, but you can just kind of say, this is not what I wanted. And again, it sucks to say it because it's so cliche, but it really is just a mindset. And so if you didn't get the grade that you wanted and you don't want to admit that defeat, you don't want to tell anybody about it, you can just kind of tell yourself, okay, I get the chance to try harder next time to really impress myself next time. So it can just be a personal journey. And also, I think that's probably the most rewarding as well, because you don't have those expectations from others and to influence you. And you can really just have it be a personal, okay, if A, then B kind of a thing.
Great, and we're glad you told us of these failures, because I think that, like you said earlier about social media and everything, you only hear about the things that people want to tell, and that's inherently those successes. And recognizing that failure is a natural part of getting to success is really great. Our second question was, what are 3 things that students today should know to be successful as a student?
Good question. I would say, well, first thing is to kind of know what you, not what you want, but what you're working towards, right? Because if the goal is to impress yourself, or if the goal is to impress others, or if the goal is to, make enough money to buy a really nice car, those are all fine, but just knowing why you're working towards something, so knowing your motivation, I'd say is a really good start towards reaching success. And then also as a student particularly, knowing where your line is. I think that's something that I learned in school, was when is too much, when have I taken on too much, and when can I say yes to people. And that's something that we all struggle with. We never want to say, no, sorry, I don't have the time for you, or I don't have the time for that. But learning your boundaries, super important, because you're no good to anybody if you're burnt out. So I think that's the second thing that students really need to know. And the third, probably what works for you, and what is supposed to, or maybe popular to work, but maybe doesn't. So for me, and it could be as simple as where do you study, that where you're most productive. A lot of people say like, oh, coffee shop, but like, if you're not productive at a coffee shop, why are you going to a coffee shop to study? Or if waiting to the last minute to write a paper is like, the thing that makes the most sense with your schedule, but it really doesn't work for you in the end, trying something new. So yeah, that's what I would say are the 3 things that I would, if somebody told me that when I was a freshman, I'd be really grateful. So.
Great. We got a really good question in the chat to me, and it was kind of specific to this past year. And it's, what impact has COVID-19 had on your idea of failure, and how you've reconciled any challenges that you faced as a recent graduate in the middle of this pandemic and just kind of different world
Yeah.
that you graduated into?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's definitely changed. I think whenever you realize that there are much different struggles out there in the world, and perhaps maybe worse struggles than you're experiencing, it's a bit harder to feel bad about yourself, right? Because it's like, oh, I didn't get the job that I wanted, but people are dying from this disease. And so it really does put things into perspective. And that doesn't mean that your failures aren't failures that you should feel bad about or be upset by, but it really does put things into perspective to say, okay, I'm not the only person going through this. The entire 2020 graduate class, was pushed into this world that is, very difficult to find employment, to find support, financially, healthcare, like everything, housing. It's been really difficult to get the things that you need. And so I've definitely been able to redefine what my failure looks like a little bit. I think as a student, I wanted to always be super high achieving. And you should want to achieve a lot. But I see myself, when I don't achieve the thing that I set out to, not as, failing and this is the end of the road, but now I get to try something else. And so that's a little bit of how I've reshaped my vision of what failure is mid-pandemic.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that's been so interesting about the past year, like you mentioned, is that everyone's kind of going through it, and talking to students who are all struggling, in the same way. At once, it's terrible that we all have kind of more hardships than ever, but all of us having the same some of the same hardships and being able to rely on one another has been definitely helped us all get through
Yeah,
it.
and I'll relate to others too, like there's
Mm.
kind of a strength in numbers. When everybody else around you can't find a job, it makes you feel a little bit less bad about not being able to find a job.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Our one other question that we have pre-submitted is, what's the biggest motivation that drives you?
That's a good question. And one that I said should be something that students should look towards in order to be successful as well. But for me, I think being able to impress myself probably would be one of my biggest motivations. I want to always improve on who I am, and who I am to others, who I am to myself, like how I treat myself. So that is one of my biggest motivations.
Great. We also have two questions that were really specific to FSU and your experience here. And those are, what experiences, as you look back on your time at FSU, what are experiences that you think are musts for students? And another one regarding at FSU and taking advantage of these opportunities as an undergraduate. Is that where you saw opportunities, your opportunities start to grow, or was it elsewhere?
Yeah, that's great. So I think for me, I really saw the most opportunities in off-campus opportunities. So with internships, that being able to like forge that professional network. And I'll say off-campus opportunities, but the way that I got there was through campus resources. And so I think really taking advantage of those people whose only job is to help you, then I think you'll be able to get a lot more out of your academic experience at FSU. Must do's, I guess, or things that students should do before they graduate. I think definitely form as many great relationships with your professors as you can. I know that's something that people say since orientation, but it's super, super true. They're great references and great like colleagues, like friends. Being able to be an adult and have somebody who is in your field or researches your interests and be able to like talk about that and have somebody is invaluable. And then like campus wise, like go to the circus once it's open. Really try to experience different aspects of campus that you wouldn't normally do. I think that was a big thing for me. If my friends didn't want to go, I just wouldn't go. But don't be afraid to go places by yourself. I think that's probably one of the best ways to really get everything that FSU has to offer.
I think that one thing that's really exciting for students who arrived this year as freshmen and arrived in the midst of everything being locked down, it's going to be really exciting for them to do a lot of those FSU centric activities for the first time, like the circus or the theater. I know that the bowling alley is going to reopen sometime. It's great.
Yeah.
And we had another question. And I love, by the way, I love what you said earlier about how the idea of an earlier loss being something that then opens up an opportunity. Like if you didn't get that first job, you would have never been seeking a job when, for example, that opportunity at either with either the UN or with Pittman Law Group. Right. And I think that's wonderful. Someone asked, how do you focus on not comparing yourself to other people's success? And it's so hard to not compare grades, accomplishments. How can we train ourselves to not compare?
That's a really good question, and I'm afraid I don't have all the answers, but because that's something we all struggle with, right? You scroll on Instagram, and next thing you know, it's like, here we go again. Somebody else is doing great, and I'm not, right? So it's really hard to not compare yourself to others. But I think something that's helped me and advice that I've gotten is that there's a time for everything. And we are so set on being successful at such a young age, when you have your whole life to reach those successes, right? So I think knowing that you'll have your time, and just because now isn't your time doesn't mean that you're the worst. It just means it's not your time. I think looking at things very literally have helped me, and taking them for face value for what they are, and not trying to read too much into it. And then realizing that, okay, if somebody you know is doing something that you wish you have done or wish you could do, now you have a friend who can help you. So I think really congratulating your friends for their successes, without being bitter, right, is a great way to have somebody who can help you out and say, okay, well, this is what I did during my application process for grad school, and it got me into school, so you could try that. Or if somebody gets, you were vying for that presidency of that organization on campus, and somebody else beat you out. Well, now you get to ask that person, like, well, what can I do to help you or to make this organization better, so you could still reach like your vision that you had, just doing it in a different way.
Selena, I had a question. As an alumni relator, I just want to know, because you did have a lot of success, and then you did also highlight your failure. And I just first want to say thank you for your vulnerability and transparency. I think it's great, and it's really important for our students to hear that and see that. But I want to know, kind of a lighthearted, what was your favorite memory here? Because you had a lot of things that you loved to do here and you were involved in, but what was your just absolute favorite memory from your time at Florida State?
Oh gosh. Thank you for that question. I think probably, so when I worked at the Middle East Center, it's located in Kellogg, right next to like Westcott over there on that side of campus. And so obviously you guys know that hill, that Mall Hill. And so whenever we set up for events, my coworker and I, Gabriella, who's become a very close friend, we had to lug everything that we had down to Landis to table on Landis Green. And so my favorite memory, I mean, it's in the moment, it was awful because like you're sweaty and like you're lugging coolers and like, tents and all this stuff, and it's super heavy. And you're like, I didn't know that we would be doing manual labor in this job. Yeah, but that's probably one of my fondest memories is working there and working with her.
Thank you. That is a great memory, but the physical labor part, going to Landis Green, especially when it's hot out in Tallahassee, that's fun on its own. Well, we have wrapped up the questions that were submitted. I will say, if anybody has any questions that they want to submit and they just didn't get to today, or they want to think about it, reach out to me. I'm happy to reach out to Selena. Obviously she's approachable, and is happy to discuss these things. But I want to thank you again, Selena, for kicking us off this week for this great spotlight on student success, because
absolutely
you are a picture of student success. So we're very appreciative for that. I did want to remind everybody that's here, this is the first day of our 3-day series, and we have a lot of other great speakers just like Selena, who are going to be talking to us about making the most out of college, success in and out of the classroom. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat for everybody. Feel free to register for one of our last 5 events. 2 of them are in-person hybrid opportunities. So just join us. And again, thank you, Selena. And if you missed anything or you want to hear anything again, we did record this, and after the series is complete on Wednesday, we will be sharing the recordings for you to see. So thank you again, Selena, and thank you, Juan, and we hope you guys all have a great day.
Thank you, guys.